Hello, everyone, and welcome back watching another episode of Honesty About Anxiety. In this episode, I'm really excited to have this episode because we're going to talk about how anxiety is passed on from previous generations, from your parents or grandparents. And for this episode, Terrence is joining us. Hi, Terrence.
Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited about that because this topic, getting the point of view or how it's anxiety is put on us from our parents or caretakers, because a lot of other guests have brought it, like I have talked about it as well, but we have not been specifically talking about it.
hmm
So tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Yes, so I'm actually a licensed clinical social worker. I live in Spartanburg, South Carolina, but I'm licensed to practice therapy in South Carolina as well as North Carolina. And for full time, I work at a college counseling center where I provide therapy services to the students on campus, but I also have my private practice entitled Missing Pieces Counseling Services, where I have my own clients that I use therapy with as well.
Hmm. Awesome. And what do you experience with anxiety?
Yeah, so personally, I have my own anxiety struggles at times where my mind will begin to race about these negative things, such as maybe you're not good enough, or maybe a certain outcome's going to happen that I don't want to happen. So that could be with interactions with people, that could be about my performance in a specific task or something like that, or even just thinking about the future. And sometimes that can be my own barrier to doing something or trying to initiate something or completing something. So, but I also have clients who experience anxiety who have similar themes as me, but they also experience it a little bit differently and maybe to a higher degree or is more severe. And I try to use my personal experience as well as my education to try to help them work through that anxiety.
Hmm. People think, like a lot of people think that pe- that therapists or counselors, they can just help everything on their own. But
hmm
no, we also need somebody's outside view of us.
Yes.
Everybody has their inside view of us, but why we need somebody else's help and why we providing the help? Because people need outside view of them,
hmm
things that they don't see inside their head.
Yeah. So a lot of times, even with myself, I thought that maybe I could work through this anxiety on my own, but it's very hard to work through something when you're actually going through it and you don't see a lot of things. You don't see how it's impacting you. You don't see the impact it has on these different relationships, whether that's personal relationships such as friends, or intimate relationships such as with a partner. And having an outside view to just try to help you understand exactly what's going on, what they see, what they notice, and how it's impacting them can be a great insight for people to realize, okay, maybe there is something that I could work on to try to help me get through this anxiety.
Hmm. Let's explain people now. Let's get right to that, into how anxiety is. How do you say? Is it passed down or
Yes.
is it taught, or
So it's
like how? What word did you use? How you people get it from their caretakers?
so of course the term is actually intergenerational trauma.
Okay.
And what intergenerational trauma is the passing down of some type of trauma through generations. So that could be intergenerational, is through like your parents or your direct caregiver, but it could also be called transgenerational trauma, which that means it goes across generations.
So
So
multiple, from
mhm,
grandparents to your parents, and then to children.
yeah, and it can be passed down through modeling. So you actually seeing your parents go through and experience anxiety. It can also go through you just observing it. So them not actually teaching you it, but you seeing how it impacts them and how they react to certain situations. And then you become accustomed to trying to, let's say, for example, you notice that whenever you try to go approach a parent or caregiver to talk to them, but they appear to be anxious, you then become anxious indirectly about trying to go talk to them. So now
Mhm.
you assumed an anxious role because now you didn't know what you were going to get from that parent. You didn't know how they were going to respond. You didn't know how they were going to react. So you couldn't predict the outcome. So now you become anxious about that outcome. And then that can translate to how you interact with other people because you don't know how to predict the outcome is going to be when you interact with other people. So now you have anxiety that way, or you have anxiety about how, let's say your parents were very strict on school or your performance in a sport or something like that, and every time that you would mess up or you didn't get the grades that they wanted you to get, they reacted out of frustration or had some
Mhm.
type of negative reaction. Now you become anxious about your performance in different areas because now you don't know if your parents are going to be happy or satisfied with how what you bring at home or how you're performing. So now you're going to be like, hey, am I doing good enough? Am I good enough? Am I performing to my best ability? And now you become anxious that way. So it just depends on the interaction between caregivers or other people growing up. But right now we're focusing on caregivers and parents. And so that's how that anxiety can be passed down through that area.
Mhm. But I want to mention, go back to what I said, parent reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think that's really, really, really big thing that gets kids into anxiety, because if they're already expecting parent to get angry,
Mm-hmm.
then they're already starting ahead of time generating that anxiety inside of them.
Yes. And what happens is your parents respond, like we said, reaction from parents. Your parents respond based off of their own experience throughout life. So that could be their own experience through early childhood experiences, their only reactions to how they uh, relationships or different interactions. So now let's say their parents taught them that, oh, you always have to be perfect, you always have to be doing something, you can never take a break. And now that parent who's become anxious because of that, now they pass the same thing on to their kid because that's what they're taught, that's what they know. And so that's how that generational piece starts to get passed down through their generations, because they teach the children, or they indirectly teach the children what they've learned from their parents or their caregiver.
Hmm. The expectations.
Hmm.
But for the next one, children, next thing that children, the way they learn is probably from seeing the parent being anxious
Hmm.
and parent having anxiety. So now you have a child who lives with the parent who's suffering from anxiety.
Hmm. Yep.
So how are those situations play out?
So let's say that you have, and this just came to my mind right
Mhm.
now, you have a parent that, maybe lived in a low income household. So they're always, anxious about bills or how they're going to pay
Mhm.
for things. So now, when every time a bill becomes due, the mortgage, light bill, just something,
Mhm.
they always talk about how, oh, I never have enough money. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. So they become anxious about that topic. Now that kid will look and see that. And now what comes into their mind is bills or financial obligations causes anxiety. So now what I grow up with thinking is I become afraid that I'm not going to have enough, or I'm not going to be able to
Mhm.
make ends meet because I saw how my parents struggled. Now it doesn't always happen that way, because some
Mhm.
kids and some people could adapt accordingly, and they can choose to have a different outcome. But so with some children and some people, they're unable to do that because now they feel like, oh, now I have to help mom or dad try to make things better, because I don't like when mom's in this negative mindset, or I don't like it when dad's in this negative mindset because of how they react. So now I feel like, oh, I'm anxious because it's my responsibility to try to help take care of things at home, and so they can attach to it that way.
Yeah, the way when I'm writing something down as well, the little points, if I'm looking down and writing things down. So adapt accordingly.
Hmm.
So how does that does that comes? I don't think. Do you think children do it already? Children do it, or are they gonna be able to do it when they're getting older? While they're getting older,
I
teenage kids
think
or older.
you'll start seeing some signs of it maybe when they're younger. So, like I said, when they notice that their parents or caregiver is getting anxious, they become anxious because again now I feel like it's my responsibility to make things better for my parents. So I take on
Mhm.
like a parent slash caregiver role for my parents when they become anxious or frustrated or upset because I might approach them and they might respond to me out of that anxiety. And now as a kid, I can't make sense that, they're upset because, they're unable to make ends meet. So the only way that I make sense of the situation is, oh, I'm the problem. So now,
Mhm.
if I make sense of it that I'm the problem, that means I got to do something to fix it. So now I become
Mhm.
anxious because I feel like I have to do something, or I'm the problem, I'm the issue. Something's wrong with me to always make them frustrated, upset because I can't understand, what an adult is going through and the struggles that an adult experiences at times.
So, what can parents do in that parent do in that kind of situation when they feeling anxious and it's a legit feeling, they have to process it anyways. But
Mhm.
what can you do to not to pass it on the child in that situation?
I think that one of the most important things is communication on a child's level. So trying to help them understand that this is not directed towards you. This is what's going on. This is how I'm feeling, or this is what is causing me to react this way, but it's not your fault. That's one way to try to, like I said,
Hmm.
it's on a child's level. So helping them not, they probably won't understand the bills and responsibilities and how that's
Hmm.
impacting you, but they can understand that it's nothing that you have done to cause me to react this way. Another thing is trying to be aware of what exactly you're responding to when interacting with children, because sometimes I could be frustrated and upset, and my kid wants to simply play with me, but then I react out of anger, frustration,
Hmm.
irritability, and I tell them to go sit down somewhere because I'm busy right now. And
Hmm.
so now that kid feels neglected and feels like, it's an issue that I want to play with my parent. And I then might, over time decrease the amount of time that I'm trying to spend with my parent because I don't want to get reacted that way. So really understanding what you're responding to at times and being connected with your own feelings and emotions so that you don't react in a situation but most likely respond to a situation. And responding is when you actually process through what you got going on so that it doesn't impact your interactions with other people or maybe your children.
Hmm. And the way I see is, well, when I'm not able, I have a daughter. So when I'm not able, I have to do something and I'm not able to do what she wants me to do it right away. I try to let her know how much time I need. I'll say
Hmm.
like it will take me about like another 10, 15 minutes, or I can even say an hour. And then I can do that with you. So not just sending the child away, but let them also know when is going to be the time that I will come.
Exactly. So now that gives them, when you do that, a sense of, okay, so right now is not a good time, but I'll come back when they're more available to me. And I think that's a very good tool that you use and a very good skill because if you need a moment as a parent or as a caregiver or even in as a partner in relationships, you can take that moment. You don't always have to respond immediately because sometimes our immediate responses is actually, like I said, a reaction, and that's not probably not the best way
Mhm.
to do it at that point in time. So if you need a moment to process or need a moment to try to figure out how you want to respond in a situation, take that moment and express that. I need 5 minutes, or come back to me in 30 minutes. I just need some time to think about a few things, and then we can talk about it. We can play. We can discuss, and then that child doesn't feel neglected, or that child doesn't feel like they're a problem because they want your attention.
Hmm. So right now we got 2 points down. Make the child to understand it's not because of them.
Hmm.
If the adult feels anxiety about something else that's going on in their lives, make sure the child understands it's not about them. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that some kind of, the way I say it is adult things that I'm dealing with right now, and then let the child know when you're gonna be able to go and do the activity with them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So those are the two good duels. But then now again, when you're the adult, let's go back to jump to the moment when you're the adult and you have all those generational anxiety that's with you. It's been with you since childhood.
Mm-hmm.
How are you gonna start dealing? How are you even gonna know that it's from your parents? It's not your own, but it's generational.
Yeah. So, if your parent if you're able to communicate with your parents, you can start asking them questions about what their childhood experience was like. How were their parents responsive emotionally to them, or how was their parents emotional availability or actual physical availability as well. So it kind of being an investigator and trying to communicate with the parents to figure out what exactly did they go through, and trying to make the connection with what they went through versus how they raised you and their interactions with you. So if you are
Oh.
able to communicate with your parents, you can do about it that way. But you can also work on it even if you aren't able to communicate with your parents, because anytime that you I guess I'll back up for a second. Children are born as, like, in my opinion, a blank slate, right?
Mhm.
So they're shaped and molded by their caregivers or the people that raised them. So even if you aren't able to directly communicate with your parents, you can probably tell, what are some of the things that you feel like you're responding to because of how your parents raised you. So for me personally, it would be I always have to be working. So when I sat down and thought about why do I have to feel like I have to be working or I have to be doing something all the time, I sat and thought about it. I was like, well, because my mom always worked and she always, stressed the importance of, being able to work and being a hard worker. So I kind of took on that responsibility. So I thought back into what caused me to have this particular belief or behavior, and it was attached to something my mom did or said. So you can do it
Mhm.
that way, but just a generic, thing, you can always remember it probably didn't start with you. So
Mhm.
you might not have the answers to some of the things how you react to certain situations or how you behave, but you can almost guarantee that it probably didn't start with you, and but you can be the one to change how you start to behave, how you start to your different beliefs, whenever you feel like it's not suiting you at this point in time.
Mhm. I see it as well, like starting to try to see your parents from the side,
Mm-hmm.
not as of what your experience was with your parents,
Mm-hmm.
but what your parents' life was like when they were growing up,
Mm-hmm.
like you were just saying, because that could have been completely different environment, different country, different in America, different state, different upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
completely different way of living. Even let's say our parents, mine and yours, they didn't have any of this technology, and
Mm-hmm.
now our kids don't have all the technology that we didn't even have, and we don't understand, but they understand all that.
Yep.
So we kind of have to see our children different way as well, because they now have completely different life from we had. So from
Exactly.
there, we'll start thinking. I'm thinking in the same way, same time moment that we're talking. So our parents had completely different life experience what we did. So we
Yep.
have to acknowledge that first.
Exactly. And that's why I said it probably didn't start with you. And sometimes we get frustrated, we get mad, we get upset because of, something our parents, always say or how they always react or behave. But they react and behave that way because of their experiences, whether that's early childhood experiences or experiences later on in life with people or, with parents or anything like that. They were shaped into this what we see now as parents through those experiences, and we kind of forget that. We kind of forget our parents have those different experiences that kind of shapes them. And when you take a step back and you then realize that, like, hey, my parents probably went through some things too, which made them, was kind of contributed to them reacting and behaving this way. Maybe I should give them a little grace and try to be more curious about it and try to understand it. And then that way I don't have to, hold any type of grudge against them or, become upset about how they interacted with me or raised me.
Hmm. Because culturally, I had that experience and I didn't acknowledge it, but I learned it later on in life. For my parents, they were brought up in Soviet Union back then, like Russian Soviet Union. So I didn't understand. Only lately, like when I was an adult, I understand why. And that was also after my mom told me that she was raised with those standards and that way of living. When I finally start understanding that she was taught something completely different from what I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So her decisions to give me um, some thoughts of hers or the way she was raising were based on what she had learned in that society.
Yep.
So,
Because a lot of the times when we think about it, our parents, our grandparents, a lot of the things that they did were based off of their need to survive.
mhm,
So the way that they interact with people, the way they interact with the world, especially parents coming up in this with the Soviet Union or even during slavery times, a
mhm,
lot of the things that happened they did based off of the need for survival, and so those were what are the beliefs and the different teachings that they taught their children is like, hey, this is how you survive. This is what you need to do. And they then try to teach us how to survive based off their experiences. And sometimes that, like I said, once it gets passed down throughout generations, some of that teachings change a little bit because, the way our parents or grandparents may have adapted, but it's still the same principle of we need to survive. And I might become anxious about, maybe I'm not going to survive because I can't connect with people, or maybe I'm not going to survive because I don't feel like I'm doing enough to get my basic needs met. And that's where anxiety comes in, but it's all about the need to survive, whether that's through interpersonal relationships or getting your basic needs met.
mhm. So now we're going to take this part all together. Was we have to acknowledge that our parents did what they did based on what they knew, and we can't judge them for, like, we can't blame our parents. It could be that some of the things were because it happened, and right now we have somebody has anxiety because of that, because of their parents. But as long as you just stay in that judgment
Mm-hmm.
or blaming them, you can't change anything.
Exactly.
So, how do people take control of an adult life? Because I think, I said maybe in a teenage life they can start already, but adult life, how can they take back control of their anxiety and leave that learned generational anxiety on the side? Or what should they do now when they acknowledge that this is generational?
Mm-hmm. So there's different approaches you could take to it, especially if you're going to actually go into therapy. If you want to actually go into therapy services, there's a lot of different therapy practices that are used in order to help treat anxiety. And that could be something like cognitive behavioral therapy, that could be
Hmm.
acceptance and commitment therapy. There's internal family systems therapy, or even EMDR therapy, which stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. So there's different therapists who maybe have trained in these different modalities that can help you, overcome anxiety through their practice. But, just simply put, you can try to become aware of where this anxiety is coming from. So the awareness is important because if anxiety starts to approach, I then can become aware of why am I having this anxiety? Where is it coming from? What is the fear that I'm having? And if I'm able to become aware of where it's coming from, I can then make small changes to help promote a different outcome. Or you can start paying attention to your body through what we call mindfulness practices. So if you pay attention to your body and you realize that, oh, when my stomach gets tight, I start to become anxious. Or when I have this heavy pressure on my chest, or when my chest get tight, or my heart starts beating fast, or maybe let's say my mind starts racing a little bit, these different small somatic, what they call somatic experiences, like pretty much your body reactions, can help you become aware of when anxiety is coming. And then now you can choose to take that awareness to be like, okay, anxiety is coming. Where is it coming from? What do I need to do in order to feel better? Or what do I need to do to try to help overcome my fear? So becoming real connected with your body and figuring out, how your body responds to anxiety, or show how anxiety shows up in your body, can help you become more aware of it like that. But like I said, a lot of people do utilize therapy because they're unable to do that type of work by themselves, and they need a
Mm-hmm.
therapist to help guide them through that work.
Mm-hmm. It takes practice. That's
Hmm.
that's one of the things I've been talking with other guests in the show as well. There's no like, there's no situation when it's gonna work next day, or it's gonna just magically starts working today. You have to practice until, but there's gonna be a day when it does become just normal reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, the different behaviors we have now, or the different skills that we have now, as far as like maybe our job or just maybe hobbies, they never came to us overnight. They came with practice. They came with many times of failing at it. And so it takes time to actually build up the skill to become aware of your anxiety, to try to help overcome your anxiety. But the more that you practice it, the easier it becomes, and then it will be like second nature to you, to
Hmm.
where you're doing it automatically. Because right now, anxiety is like sometimes an automatic response to a situation, because we've learned it so over a period of time, to where it's now automatic, like it just automatically happens. But when you take the time to slow down and process through it, and slow down and become aware of it, you then start to build new behavioral patterns that kind of combats the anxiety.
Hmm. And it takes time. That's why I say it takes time with practice. But then after that practice and how it becomes normal, that actually now I'm thinking it does feel like it just happened, like you always had it. Like I've been practicing my things, my last anxiety things like 10 years ago. But I remember when it was only 8 years after I started practicing. And I already like had to like remember what it feels like because I'm already not used to it having that anxiety feeling.
Hmm.
So this not having that feeling, it still comes occasionally, but I know how when it comes what to do and how to make it only like maybe go away right away, or if it doesn't go right away, then what to do. But most of the time it's not there at all because I my practice has been already 10 years long, and those memories are already so much in the past. So that's why, like you say, like learning to ride a bicycle, when you already know how to do it, you don't kind of remember anymore how you were learning to do that. It feels like
Hmm.
you always knew how to do it.
Exactly.
Hmm. So that's the point where you get there, but it still takes your practice to get there.
Yep.
So that's good, Joel. So, what do you have used for yourself? What tools do you use when you get anxiety, like you feel anxiety?
I do a lot of again mindfulness practices. So that could look like meditation. So and when I say meditation, I don't mean you have to sit with your legs crossed and your hands up, and but it's
No.
more of like deep breathing exercises. Because once you do the deep breathing exercises, maybe like inhale for a 4 count, or exhale for a 4 count, or you can do what they call square breathing, where each inhale or exhale is a line in a square, and you're trying to draw a
Mhm.
square with your breath. Each time you're breathing, what you're doing intentionally. So that's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is doing something intentionally,
Mhm.
and bringing your focus to that task, or that behavior, or anything like that. So it's creating, helping you create your awareness of it. So if I bring my awareness to my breathing, and I'm practicing deep breathing, it's helping calm my nervous system down, so where I can then process through something. So it calms my anxiety down, because I'm becoming aware of my breath, and not focusing my attention on the anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of mindfulness practices that way. You can also do mindfulness through, maybe going outside and closing your eyes and trying to focus on everything that you hear or
Mm-hmm.
everything that you smell.
Mm-hmm.
You can also do it by everything that you feel. Or if you like food, you can do, try to eat something that's very tasteful, and try to focus on everything that you taste, the different flavors you taste. So I do a lot of different mindfulness things to try to help me with anxiety. But then I also, again, try to challenge my anxiety thoughts, my anxious thoughts. So I try to think about, where is this coming from? What am
Okay.
I becoming anxious about? And what is the outcome that I want? And then how can I work to get towards that outcome? And a lot of times that sounds like a lot, but your mind is already doing this, like like I said, automatically, it's doing it real fast. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why sometimes when we react, it does it so fast. So we think this reaction is going to give us the outcome that we want. But you're kind of, in a way, taking the time to slow it down and process through it. And you're teaching yourself to slow down and process through things instead of reacting. So I do a lot of mindfulness practices. um, I also, have my own therapist that's helping me try
Mm-hmm.
to work through the anxiety with the things that I can't work on by myself. Because again, there's some behaviors, there's some ways that I think and process things that might not be very beneficial to me. And again, like we discussed earlier, having that outside point of view really helps you kind of become more aware and cognizant about what you got going on. So I also have a therapist to help me with some of the things that I'm unable to work with.
Mm-hmm. I like also pointing out what you were saying, that what is your outcome. I teach that as well. Like, focus on what's the outcome you want is. So actually taking that pause, the way I do mine as well, like I just settle down for, like, if I have time, I sit down and I think about the outcome. If I don't have time, it's something that suddenly just happened, I try to go like, what's the next best thing to do? Like,
Exactly.
fast as possible. What's the next thing to do? But I also know it's always for the outcome, for the most positive outcome.
Hmm.
What's the next thing to do to get a positive outcome out of this situation? Which situation can be something really, really bad, but it's like, okay, well, nothing we can do about this situation, that it is what it is right now. I was just writing it down before the show as well. We can't, only thing we can change is the future.
Hmm.
We can't change what is right now. So we can't wish, like, I wish there would not be right now like this. But we can wish that it will be different in moment from now, an hour from now, in a week from now, in a year from now.
Yep. Exactly right. I agree with that
Mhm.
completely.
So when at that moment when we're having the anxiety and everything, we can't wish not to have anxiety in that moment. So that's why I'm trying to put it all together. And we have to think about how we can have the next moment. When is going to be the next moment? How long it take? What are we going to do now to make sure that anxiety is just going to pass?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the time, and I like the way you said that anxiety will pass, that our different emotions, because feeling anxious is an emotion, our emotions are temporary. Because in a specific day, particular day, you can be happy, you can be sad, you can, feel scared, you can feel anxious, you can feel excited, you can feel all these different emotions throughout the day. But
Mm-hmm.
that shows you that these emotions that I experience does not last forever, that they will pass. And so one way that people can kind of gauge their progress with their anxiety is, how long does my anxiety last? Like, oh, it lasts for like 2 hours. But then today, I was able to do some of this therapy, this work on my anxiety, and it only lasted for 30 minutes. That then shows you that you kind of made progress with working with your anxiety, and you can gauge it that way, instead of thinking, oh, I'm just tired of this, I always feel anxious. But you might always feel anxious, but you don't feel anxious as long, and you're able to still kind of be productive throughout your day.
Okay, that's actually, Terrence, that's good, because that made me think about, people have to acknowledge, like you were just saying, how long it is. And then, like you were saying one moment, you were saying it's gonna last forever. And then the person has this idea, I always feel anxious, and they have to change that thought to saying, when I feel anxious, I feel that feeling for 1 hour.
Yep.
And then they start using the tools, and then next time they not gonna say, I always feel anxious. They say, I feel anxious for half an hour. That's cool. I didn't think about it. Like I know like I have my own tools, but I never thought about it, this putting that time, like a time to that anxiety.
Yeah. And that just again helps you and give you that encouragement. Oh, this stuff is working or this stuff isn't working. And you can, either change it if it's not working, or if it's, is working, you can do more of it. That way you then can show yourself that I am getting better, and you don't discourage yourself by saying this anxiety is still here. What's not working? It might still be there, but it probably is not as severe, and it probably doesn't last as long. And that means that whatever you're doing right now is showing some type of progress with dealing with your anxiety.
Hmm. That's great thing to point out as well. So, what else would you say about generational anxiety?
So I think the main points with intergenerational trauma or generational anxiety is, again, to always remember it probably didn't start with you. So giving yourself some type of compassion and giving yourself some type of grace to understand that, but also extending that grace to maybe your parents or grandparents or ancestors or anything like that. Again, that compassion and grace to show them that, hey, I know that you had your own experiences. I know that it had some type of impact on you. And I understand that the way that you grew up kind of influenced how you brought me up. And I can't really, like you said, have that judgment towards you for that. So I think that's a very important part of it. And another thing is that it's never too late to break that generational chain, that generational cycle. So, like, if you do have parents, I mean, if you do have children, or someone you're raising, or even family members, you can break that chain by changing some of the ways you react to certain situations, or getting some type of therapy if you feel like that's going to help. But it can start with you. So it didn't start with you, but it can end with you. That's what I wanted to say. But so yeah,
Mhm.
that generational trauma didn't start with you, but it can end with you through the actions and behaviors that you do now.
Hmm. I always try to teach the parents as well that they don't put your own fears, same goes anxiety, fears.
Hmm.
Don't put your own fears on your children. Just because you are scared of something doesn't mean that your children are scared of it or have to be scared of it. Like there's some
Exactly.
common sense things that don't touch the hot oven, but they're especially let's say performance. Maybe the parents are scared of being on the stage, but the child loves to be on the stage. So let the child, you have to separate yourself, your own fear from the child, so they can be their own person and not
Hmm.
have your fear. So that takes work for some of the people to acknowledge first of all that they even doing that.
Yep. Absolutely correct.
Because I always pointed out to all the other parents that just because you're scared of something, your children doesn't don't have to be scared of that unless, well, common sense things they will come anyways.
Hmm.
They learn that anyways. So that's great. Anything else you want to add to this before we're gonna talk about what you do and how people can contact with you?
I think that's about it so far. I really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully, you found it beneficial and helpful, and I hope others have found it beneficial as helpful as well.
Hmm. I think we kind of covered everything, basically how it works, how generational anxiety works. So that I think we covered everything on that as well. So Terence, how can people contact you, and what would be what would be the reasons why they should contact you? How
Of
should we?
course.
Okay.
So the probably the best way to contact with me would be an inquiry form that's on my website, which is she listed down below. It's www.missingpiecescounselingllc.com. So www.missingpiecescounselingllc.com, or you can look me up on Facebook, which is Missing Pieces Counseling Services, or on Instagram, which is Missing Pieces Counseling. And I do different workshops or seminars, or I do public speaking engagements, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody would like me to, do that, whether that's in person or over virtually via Zoom or any other platform, you can always contact me on one of those type of platforms.
Mm-hmm. Great. It's awesome. One thing that the viewers already get used to with this, so I probably don't have to tell the viewers, but I ask all my guests, what is your view of happiness, your personal view of happiness, not what other people think happiness is, what or generally people think happiness is, but just for you.
Yeah. So for me, happiness would, and that's a very interesting question that you asked, because not a lot of people think about, like, oh my God, what is happiness or what makes me happy? But I think happiness for me would be doing the things that you enjoy, whether that's like, for me, it's riding my motorcycle. And I did that, this weekend. So I really
Mhm.
like riding my motorcycle, especially with some of my friends. And I'm happy during that moment. Or when I'm spending time with my family or some of my friends, or maybe when someone says that I helped them in my practice or I helped change their life, that makes me happy. So I think happiness isn't this overall goal that we're trying to reach. I don't That's what I personally don't think. I think that we have happy moments and happy experiences, and we need to start looking at that and really taking in that, oh, this moment made me happy. This experience made me happy. Not necessarily this person, because this
Mhm.
when we think of that people make us happy, and let's say for some reason we lose that person, then we, in a way, saying that we lost our happiness. But you don't become happy because of people. You become happy because of the experiences you have with people and the memories that you create with people.
Mhm.
So I like to point that out as well.
Mhm. And name maybe few or three things that things or activities again, just things that make you feel happy, just like
Yes, riding my motorcycle, learning new things to help other people, and spending time with my family.
hmm That's and that's easy. That's what I'm saying. People think of, like you were saying, people think that the happiness had to be something incredible, big, like big cake on a table, but it's not.
Yeah.
And when the people understand that that's not what it actually is, they can have that. Not that they can have it in their life, they understand that we all have it already in our life. We just have to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, Terence, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. It was really helpful.
No, thank you,
So,
and I appreciate you having me here to share this with everyone.
hmm thank you. And viewers, now you know what generational anxiety is and how to handle it in your own life, how to acknowledge if you had it from your parents, or how to acknowledge and make sure you don't hand it over to your children. So take this knowledge and apply it to your life. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. There's altogether 9 episodes on anxiety, so make sure to watch the other ones as well. And thank you, Terence. Thank you, the viewers, for watching. And see you in the next episode. And Terence, have a good day. People watching, have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.